Hey, good morning. Scott Luton, Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, good morning. How you doing?
I am doing very well. Back from totally non-vacation, but a little bit of travels last week, right? So, yeah, very well.
We had some great food over the weekend.
Yes, that
right?
was fantastic.
From a
We
variety.
actually left the house and met in person, folks. Appropriately masked. I wish I could show you my Darth Vader mask that I wore.
You're not messing around when it comes to masks. That is a A1 heavy duty, no messing around.
Oh yeah, full on respirator. I'm telling you, when I walk in places, I still think they think I'm going to rob them. So.
Well, hey, before we even get started, we got two very special people that are already tuned in with us here. Three now. Jeff Miller. So Jeff, all the best to you and your family. Safe travels. We're looking forward to having you back. I know that you've been off the grid a bit, but on behalf of Greg and our entire team here, you're in our thoughts and prayers, and we look forward to reconnecting with you soon.
Amen.
Felicia with the RLA, the Reverse Logistics Association. She's right here with us. They've got no shortage of events. Felicia, great to have you here. And then finally, one quick shout out. You can't have a live stream without Benji Gold Clang, right?
Yeah. Settled in New York, I reckon, by now.
That's right. All right. So today is the Supply Chain Buzz. As always, every Monday at 12 noon Eastern time, Greg and I tackle some of the biggest news stories that are taking place across global supply chain. And of course, it's not just our take, it's your take, our community's take, and they always bring it. They never let us down, do they, Greg?
Never, ever. And I'm glad to have Jeff here. I haven't argued with anybody lately, so
that's right.
I've missed it.
Hey, quick program note before we get started here today. So if you enjoyed the live stream episode, please be sure to check out our podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Today, Greg, we published the first episode that is associated with the 2020 AIAG Supply Chain Summit. That is, Greg, what's the acronym stand for?
That is the Automotive Industry Action Group, Scott. We interviewed.
And it's all about action.
Mostly because last week you did a lot of those interviews, right? But the one we published today, is that Jim?
That was we had our friends at Cesari with us, and
I did that one.
Yes,
I actually did do some work.
Well, we're going to talk about that episode in the second half of today's show. So to our audience, great to have you here. And again, if you enjoy the live stream, be sure to check out our podcast. Just search for Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcast from. All right. So, Greg, are we ready to dive into the headlines? Are you ready?
We ought to talk headlines before we get back to everybody else we need to acknowledge, because it's getting to be a long list, isn't it?
Agreed.
Here we go.
Well, let's dive right in. So this story is great news, big news, but it's not going to surprise many folks, certainly the folks that have been tuning into our live stream. So warehousing is breaking records. In this story from Matt Leonard and the talented Supply Chain Dive team, the warehousing industry is not only back to its pre-pandemic levels of employment, but Greg, at 1.25 million workers in the warehouse and storage sector in September, that, my friend, is the highest recorded workforce number ever for the industry.
Wow.
And that's according history, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now we know, and all the talented people in the audience knows, e-commerce is a huge driver in all of that. The article states that e-commerce sales jumped 32% from Q1 to Q2 to reach a record-breaking 212 billion, B as in Bezos, number. Now, Greg, did you ever ask yourself, hey, for context, what can we compare that to? Well, I got something for you. According to the IMF.
Oh, that was a rhetorical question.
Yes, it was. I didn't even give you a chance. The ultimate rhetorical. So according to the IMF, that puts e-commerce at about the size of the entire 2019 economy of Greece. That is interesting perspective there. Huh? Now, of course, e-commerce is driving it. Also, we know automation and robotics are really disseminating throughout, right? Organizations are looking at automation and bots to thrive more and more. but also seasonal employment, as the article speaks to. Companies are leveraging more and more human talent to also especially deal with peak. DHL 7,000, so who is their seasonal employment number. XPO 25K, FedEx 70,000, UPS and Amazon each are bringing on 100,000 people.
Right.
Wow. All right. So one final note here, Greg, before I get your take on this. So speaking of XPO, we're both big fans of a lot of that thought leadership that comes out of there, some innovative stuff they're doing. Ashfaq Chaudhary served as president for Supply Chain Americas. He's quoted in the article that and says that beyond leveraging their automation efforts, which is massive, seasonal hiring, again, impressive, it's 25,000, but they're looking to add 3 million square feet of warehouse space in North America alone to tackle peak. That is interesting. Now, we published a great interview with Ashfaq last week. We'll talk about that here towards the end. So a lot more to come there. But Greg, like we said at the beginning, not too many surprises here, right?
None at all. And could the timing be better? I mean, with the veritable collapse of the service industry, otherwise, restaurants and people who service office buildings and security personnel, and we were hearing a lot about those industries. These are great replacement jobs, and I wonder how much ability supply chain expansion and this new recognition of how important and how hands-on supply chain is. I wonder how much impact that will have on re-employing people. I mean, maybe that's part of the new normal. We may be seeing the new normal as more hands on supply chain.
That's a great point. And I think there's a lot to that possible prediction. I think secondly, as we've talked about, and I love banging the drum on this, is that technology beyond peak, right? A lot of these numbers we were just talking about offered temporary opportunities, right? But big believers that technology is going to open the door for so many opportunities for folks if they're willing to learn more, learn new things, get out of their comfort zone, and most importantly, take the action and walk through those doors of opportunity. So excited about this. And clearly the historic times that we're living in, supply chain and otherwise, in 2020, this is yet one more chapter.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, imagine there are 44 million supply chain professionals going into COVID. Imagine if that number grows dramatically, and I bet you that it will. With supply chain in the forefront as it is, whether it is physical logistics like this or other roles, if you're looking for a job, look in supply chain. As Sandra McQuillan says, come on down.
Yeah, a little throwback to The Price is Right. All right, so Greg, before we hit headline number 2, let's say hello to a few folks here, because you're right. There's a ton of folks here, a ton of good old friends, and some new ones here. Yeah. So Daria Patel, he's been with us time and time again. Great to have you here, Daria. David, of course, love what David brings to the table, including his sense of humor. He and Nirfad keep us on our toes.
No doubt.
Clay, the dog, Phillips. I feel like we should add something prior to the dog, not bulldog, because that's too prevalent here in Georgia.
I like the dog. I've been watching College Game Day, and the bear is taking an ever more prominent role on College Game Day. I really think we need to have a chart of what's going on in supply chain, and Clay can inform us.
Agreed.
I don't think that's too much pressure for Clay. Do you?
Nope. Well, it's time to flip the tables on him, and for that matter, Amanda again soon. And we'll might do just that in our upcoming 500th episode, which is crazy. Sophia, our resident supply chain analyst and ambassador. Great to have you here as always, Sophia. Michael Avra. Hey, Michael, I got your LinkedIn note. I appreciate that. We need to take you up on that, but hopefully you're doing well, and great to have you here tuned in via the live stream. Greg, we have Albina, maybe, and I apologize if I got that wrong. We try our hardest, I promise you. Eric and Larry Klein enjoyed your comments. I think it was last week as we were talking about freight forwarding, or maybe lean is where Larry chimed in. That was great last week. Memory, of course, memory. I love Greg. Have you been following memory on some of the other channels?
On her running routine. I saw that from Instagram.
Well, she's running, but also her culinary skills. Amanda and I were inspired with something she shared last week. Either mussels or oysters. I get them confused. And we had that last night, thanks to Memory's
that's awesome.
Culinary adventures. So enjoy what you're doing there, Memory. And Pierre, a fellow resident of Supply Chain City, Atlanta, GA. Great to have you here with us, Pierre. All right. So, Greg, let's keep driving. We got a ton to tackle here. This is kind of a supplemental piece to the warehousing story. So when I posted this on Twitter over the weekend, one of our favorites, Abir Thakurta, who is a chief supply chain officer with a well-known furniture enterprise here in Atlanta, can't find enough people. He was adding great, succinct color commentary to what is there is a plethora, a dearth. Sorry, use the wrong th. A dearth of warehouse talent. So one more reason why we're turning to robotics there. Okay, so let's talk about paper versus plastic. Greg, have you ever been asked that question in the past decades?
I have, but that question has essentially gone away, and now it is plastic, right?
It's back, baby. It's back. Ageless question is back, but it means something new. So, well, if paper would just cooperate a little bit more, let's add a little context to that. So in the story from Wall Street Journal, we learned about the huge challenges of taking plastics out of global supply chain, particularly related to the food industry. So as we can all attest, there's a large consumer sentiment to using less plastic. At least I feel it in our household. And I think about it every time I may turn to a plastic bag for a one use, right? But paper is appealing, according to the articles. It's made from renewable resources, more to come on that, easily recyclable, which I'm not sure about that in our experience. And what I just talked about, not many folks want to use single-use plastics. So, Greg, paper has begun to replace, as we both experienced, plastic straws, bags, fruit trays, even shrink wrap for drinks. But a brief history lesson. So just prior to World War II, CPG was all about paper, right? Paper was the dominant force. Plastics functionality began to permeate the industry because it was water resistant, it was grease resistant, and it was a lot easier to seal things, right? Now manufacturers are trying to plasticize paper, really to get their cake and eat it too. They're experiencing big challenges though. For example, did you know that once they coat paper to get better resistance to the elements, to take advantage of some of those plastic advantages, it immediately becomes more difficult to recycle. In fact, Greg, there is draft legislation in Europe to treat coated paper, to regulate that the same way they regulate single-use plastic. It really speaks to the challenges of recycling it. Additional challenges to using paper more is shelf life expectations, which consumers are after, certainly, and overall different climate, climates that the products will find themselves in and for those durations. Right. Now, the plastics industry, Greg, do you think they'd have anything to say about this big shift here?
I doubt it. No.
So as you might expect, they've got something to say or two here. They claim that paper uses more resources to produce, and they point to deforestation concerns. We talked about that, I think, on a buzz or two ago, some of the cool things that Unilever was doing. The article cites a variety of organizations that are making gains while experiencing these pains and challenges in this paper versus plastic battle, including Unilever, Nestle, P&G, and WestRock. Of course, WestRock based right here in the Atlanta area. But what this brings to my mind, Greg, of course, there's not going to be any easy answers here because we really are trying to get our cake and eat it too in many ways, in a good, positive way. So, Greg, we kind of should expect these learning pains, right?
Well, yeah, of course. And I think, I can't believe I'm going to do this. I'm going to validate somewhat of the plastic industry's statement, and that is that 68 million trees are cut down a year for paper products. Now, what they don't say, and with us living in a paper producing state, Georgia, is that those trees only exist to create paper. right? We've got a whole, when you get below the gnat line, a certain point in Georgia, it's nothing but pine forests, right? And they are man-made pine forests solely for the purpose of producing paper. So, and they are rapidly replenished with trees and very systematically done so. So I think we have to acknowledge that there is maybe the slightest bit of self-interest at play here. But, and I bet you didn't know this, Scott, I happen to know a little bit about paper and coated paper because I was in the printing industry. Now, I am no Sarah Scudder, but I know a bit about printing. And I do know that 25% of all waste in all landfills, all municipal landfills, is paper. And I know that it is at one point when we were having the paper plastic discussion, it was a far greater percentage of waste in landfills. And the problem with paper is not that it is so predominant. The problem is that it is so rarely recycled. And that is a situation that we need to address. We need to. Yep, go ahead.
I agree with you. And that, so when I read that about the executives that were cited in the article, there were several unnamed executives about how they said paper was more easily recyclable. I'm immediately thinking of my household where a lot of the paper we use, think of it, it's napkins, they get dirty, right? Or they get wet, or, the article even talked about how paper, it's easier for consumers to make the decision of where to put the paper products in the recyclable bins. But the mix match that we know, if you look at the recycling industry, one of the things they're struggling with is separating all the different recyclable products. And number two, I can't remember the term they use, but basically they're dirty products, and there's less value in cleaning and then re-entering the now decontaminated product to be recycled.
Yeah.
So no shortage of challenges, but you know what? The good news here is that these major huge companies with huge footprints, they're putting a lot of their innovative resources into the battle to figure out how we can, at least, despite the challenges we have with paper, at least take some plastics out of supply chain, which we know are contributing to some of the things we've all been reading about in recent years.
At the very least, paper does not have a half-life.
Yeah.
Which is only a mild exaggeration of the life of plastics, which is approximately 400 years. So
yes,
and we have seen that, especially in some of the emerging economies, they are plastics are frequently disposed of into the rivers, which lead to the oceans.
Right. Yes.
So
a lot more to come on this.
There's a lot of challenges here. At least we're attempting to move the right direction. I think people have the right awareness these days, at least people in industrialized and first world countries do. And I think the first world is starting to engage with emerging economies to start to help them solve that problem. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there is this great collection, the Ocean Initiative or whatever. They've got a huge boom system where they collect it. They've got these little conveyors that they can set up in the rivers in Indonesia, which is one of the most predominant polluters on the planet, to collect the plastics before they get to the ocean and to enable them to be hauled away. So, look, there's all kinds of ways to attack this problem, and I'm just glad that we're thinking and doing something about it.
Agreed. So y'all check that out via a great team over at the Wall Street Journal. I think this was part of the logistics report, which we get an email every day from Paul Page to the team. Great reporting there. All right. So Greg, let's say hello to a few folks on the panel here. Keith Duckworth. So he's calling in from the state that has Berrien Springs, Christmas pickle capital of the world. Okay. That's a new one for me.
I had never even heard of a Christmas pickle.
Sounds like a Mayberry episode. Aunt B may be involved there with making some of those infamous, terrible pickles, but we'll find out what the Christmas pickle is all about.
I think we also ought to acknowledge our neighbors to the north, for whom it is Thanksgiving.
Canada, that's right. Yeah, that's a good point. Jeff says, hey, for warehouse employment to be at this all-time high with the increasing use of automation means that the per capita productivity of the workers is also rising. This is a virtuous cycle.
I love that term, virtuous cycle, man.
He's always elevating the conversation, isn't he?
That acknowledges the data that you provided right after, right? Not only is warehouse employment rising, but there's clearly much more opportunity for it to rise and to sustain, as based on the data that you provided, and then Abir's affirmation.
Yes. So, well, all right. So there's a ton of comments.
Job, go to a warehouse.
So Tom, Greg, there's a ton of comments here on both these stories. I'm going to shoot through these real quick because I want to try to give as many folks. So Larry says, Department of Defense could learn from this. Where I am, we are in the Stone Age as far as warehouse management. All right.
Well, everybody has to have seen Indiana Jones by now. They lost the Ark of the Covenant. Okay.
Oh, it was a good movie, man. They don't make movies like that anymore. It's a shame. All right, Benjamin. I check the dive every morning to stay up to date on ocean logistics news. And Benjamin's referring to the supply chain dive, which provided the first story. I agree with you. We're big fans of their reporting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Gary Smith is with us. Warehousing is only one aspect of supply chain. The possibilities are endless. Well said, Gary, especially if you look at it from that end-to-end point of view. All right, Larry, you are right. The NLCS starts today. Go Braves. Game 1. So excited. The Braves playing perhaps the other best team in the majors this year, the Dodgers. So we'll see how that goes. But kindred spirits with you, Larry. All right, so Tom is with us. So Tom is Greg, as you know, he's a relocated veteran. He's got some experience in supply chain. He's now in the upstate of South Carolina. And there he says he is seeing an increase in warehouse jobs in Greenville, South Carolina.
The Metroplex, the Greenville-Spartanburg Metroplex.
Sounds good to me.
Oh, seriously. It's been called that since the 80s.
Really?
Yes.
Gosh, I'm from South Carolina. I hadn't heard that. Man,
I'm surprised.
I'm in the Stone Age. Like me and Larry are back here in the Stone Age, I guess. All right, so Aaron Freed, who has been weighing in hot and heavy in recent live streams, good stuff. In fact, we got to circle back to that Tesla conversation. He says a number of new warehouses opening up in Richmond, Virginia. Yeah, I'll tell you, they're opening up certainly across the Southeast and, for that matter, coast to coast. See, Michael says, fantastic article. Especially enjoyed the challenges in the warmer regions of the world. Agreed, right. Michael. Climate is a big deal there.
Well, also humidity, right? I mean, paper is not as resilient to humidity as plastic is, of course.
Yep. Keith says the inventions on board that actually use plant-based compounds that mimic plastic.
So that's a good point. There's actually companies, a number of companies, and I had heard about it some time back, but haven't heard anything recently, making plastic bags out of cornstarch that dissolves in warm water.
Really?
So bring your bags home, throw them in the sink, right? Not even boiling water, just warm water, and away they go.
Love it. Sophia talks along those lines a little bit. Some other companies are using algae to replace plastic. This algae is biodegradable and a plague in many lakes in different countries, including Mexico. Good stuff there. Let's see. Michael also says it's going to be interesting to see how effective the plastic eating enzyme just developed performs on a mass scale, and if that helps reduce plastics after use. Cassiano, to your point, Greg, happy Thanksgiving from Canada. Cassiano, great to have you here with us, and happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. Yeah. All right, a couple quick comments. Sorry, Greg, I had to get through as many of these. Folks are weighing in. They're jumping out of the week with the juices clearly going through here, coursing through veins. Felipe says, what you're talking about is a very delicate matter. Consider, for example, the millions of workers in India dependent on the plastic industry. Felipe, that is an excellent point.
Yep.
And Greg, I know you're going to weigh in here, but really quick, it's all about checks and balances in global supply chain, and far beyond the workforce component. You got pricing, you've got infrastructure, you've got, when you make adjustments here, you have the ripple effect elsewhere. Right. And that's what I really wish, Greg, that consumers that are demanding with fists own tables for nearshoring and onshoring initiatives take place, really understand the big picture. So, Greg, what's some of your comments there?
It's all about economics. Look, I mean, you can go all the way back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Your first need is safety and security. And, in some of the places that Felipe is talking about in India, just survival is critical. You don't think about conservation. You don't think about some of those higher purposes while all you're trying to do is survive through the day. I think about the agricultural age here in the States, which seems like so long ago, but for my state, Kansas, was not that long ago. And the mere survival factor didn't really allow people to think about whether they were overusing water or, the Dust Bowl, right, during the Depression in the 30s, right? Didn't even allow them to think about whether they were properly utilizing the land to grow the crops. And that had a big effect. But that lesson of the Dust Bowl is something that we should not let go past us. And if we need to support emerging economies like so many of those in India, we need to do so with a way that doesn't sacrifice the entire planet. So there's a medium there, but the truth is it is all about economics. We've got to make it economically feasible to be circular, to recycle, to do all these things that we want to do to save our planet, because the truth is it isn't going to matter as much as we all sit here and kvetch about it in these calls, in these discussions. When we go to the store, we vote with our wallets. So I will always put the onus back on the consumer. We should vote with our wallets, which is, by the way, not only difficult to do from an economic standpoint, but even from an understanding of how you are contributing to the uplift or demise of the world. It's difficult to know what kind of products your products are packaged in.
Right. You're voting whether you like it or not.
Yeah, that's right.
Undoubtedly, whether you embrace it and actively vote or, it's not front of mind. So great point there, Greg and Felipe. Memory says, she raises a great point here. Again, it goes back to pluses and minuses, right? Can we talk about the impact of disposable face masks? That's a major concern for the environment. Great point, Memory. Great point. I'll tell you that Greg is waging at least a one family war on non-disposable face masks. You should have seen this thing was worth this thing was worth adding Darth to the front of Greg's name somewhere. So, but kidding aside, Memory, great point. And you can't go to many grocery stores or other retail stores and in the parking lot see several of disposable face masks on the on the ground. So, all right. Thanks for all the great comments. Clearly, these first two stories have got a lot of things going, a lot of perspective, got the juices going. So let's keep driving, Greg, because this third one, this third story, we're going to get some good news. Despite all the challenges, you're going to give us some good news, Greg, especially in the world of retail.
I'm going to start with a quick smack of reality, but we are going to get to some good news, and that is, as you know, periodically we have identified the list of retailers that have gone bankrupt this year, and that list is now 27 people or 27 companies, and there are 17 more companies at high risk of going out of business, inclusive of some companies that have recently had some good news. But 5 particular retailers are able to win and even enhance their business during this. And it's interesting what some of the dynamics are. For instance, one is Chewy. Everyone's still feeding their dogs, thankfully. But also Chewy was 100% online to begin with. So their sales increased even in March and April, when I think we all thought the economy was collapsing in April, right?
Yep. Even the worms got to eat, Greg.
That's right. Their sales increased 28.7%. And even though traditional retail pet stores were deemed essential, there was an incredible reduction in traffic, and because people were staying home in droves, and Chewy capitalized on that as well. So that their net sales grew something like 47. In the most recent quarter, 47%, $1.7 billion with what they call auto ship, meaning people basically putting a schedule on their dog food. $1.2 billion worth of sales. So they succeeded because of their onlinedness. Lululemon. Okay. So as we all started to gain the COVID-19, we all started getting a little bit more, hopefully, or many of us started getting a little bit more diligent about our exercise routines. One person who I'd like to acknowledge is Nerfad Nadarevich, who I think he has lost something like 16 pounds in 3 weeks, something ridiculous like that. Now, first of all, Nerfad is a giant. He's 6'6", so literally a giant. He's 6'6", but he's trying to drop. I don't know exactly. I'm sure he'll let us know. He's trying to drop a few lbs there.
kgs.
Kgs in his case, though he does a great job for those of us who are metrically disinclined to convert it to pounds. So I appreciate that also. But the sales in clothing went down almost as much as sales at airlines, 89%, because it didn't matter what any of us wore anymore. And of course, people weren't buying pants at the rate they were buying tops. I think we've addressed that point as well. But because of the exercise thing, Lululemon has benefited. Likewise with our friends at Dick's Sporting Goods, though they did have a drop in sales in the stores, their sales have been driven pretty heavily by their online presence, which they had conquered many decades ago, and have been a pretty good performer. If you've ever, the sporting goods industry in general, by the way, is really, really good at online sales. They started kind of the revolution in selling online. I'm going to say, Scott, over 2 decades ago. Wholesale clubs like BJ's and Costco, they have all done really, really well. And our friends, who frankly I was a little bit worried about, despite the success that they had at Target. Our friends at Target have turned out to be a great resource for so many discount and department store products online. And they have really capitalized, and they have literally put billions into their ability to not only capitalize, but to also perform in terms of fulfillment better as well. So those are just a few, but the most prominent companies that have done well here. And a lot of that has to do with resilience, right? It has to do with automation. And it has to do with the adaptability that they have shown in these times.
Greg, I want to follow up your point. You and I both were part of the webinar with the great folks over at Gray Orange and Cap Gemini. And since you said resilience, of course, that's on the tips of most everybody's tongue, especially in supply chain. One of the key takeaways from the whole discussion for me was either Jeff or Cindy referred to the opposite of resilience being fragile.
Yes,
fragility, right? So I've taken that nugget and I've used it in a couple of conversations. I used it on a neat panel discussion with our friends at SAP. Mm-hmm. And it really, the more I talk about that and the more I get people's reaction to that, it's such a great counterpoint that fights back against the cliche that resilience is. That word is just a word, not the notion behind it. And it really gets you thinking. And what I heard as you describe some of these retailers is not only were they making efforts to develop a more mature level of resilience, but they were recognizing where their models might be more fragile than in other places and embracing it and acknowledging it and building a plan to attack it.
Undoubtedly. And their resiliency in a lot of cases, and I don't think we want to gloss over this, their resiliency in a lot of cases started with fiscal responsibility, not just supply chain, but these were companies that were not overly laden with debt, right? That weren't sort of living hand to mouth like so many companies were before COVID. They had adequate reserves and they were using them already to improve their businesses. I mean, you don't do a $1.4 billion project overnight. Obviously, some of those projects had to have been underway, right?
Yep.
So there were companies that, while not responding directly to COVID or not expecting, clearly no one expected a global seismic societal disruption, but they were working to improve their own their own methodology, even prior to this. And that's a critical part of resiliency. Resiliency doesn't start when you get smacked in the face. Resiliency starts when you're trying to reduce the fragility of your organization.
Great point. And lots of these companies weren't blaming the pandemic for some of their challenges. That, to your point, it goes back to being sound in the first place, right? And not
in the management teams that blame the pandemic have probably blamed a lot of other situations in the past.
Lots of boogity.
Good management teams don't blame.
Right. Hey, Corinne is with us. Corinne, sit tight. I know you're busy. Got 1,000 things going on. We're going to talk about Tech Talk here in the second half of the show. But yeah, 500 episodes coming in hot. You're right, Corinne. Let's see here. Aaron says, Aaron is defining the kvetch word. There's Greg, your use of that word has inspired several comments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yiddish word meaning to complain, to bitch about, to whine, not to be confused with kibitz, which is cracking wise or bothering someone who is working with unneeded commentary. Aaron, love that. Just so you know, Aaron.
Also easier to spell than tchotchke, which is another Yiddish word.
Right.
I'd love to see everyone's spelling of tchotchke.
Yes. And this week we're celebrating Dictionary Day, because Noah Webster.
Is that really true, or are you just doing that because
true? It's true. Noah Webster was born, I think it was October 16th. Wow. And I'm sure Amanda or Clay will correct me. But his birth date, since he's the first to compile the first American dictionary of the English language, is referred to and celebrated in some parts of the world, I guess, as Dictionary Day. All right, let's see here. Amanda, speaking of Amanda, she's heard wonderful things about Chewy's excellent customer service. If your pet passes away, they'll send flowers and a sympathy note and credit or postpone subscriptions.
Wow.
How about that? Keith says regarding Chewy, man, you really opened up a can of, speaking of worms, with Chewy.
Well, they are legendary in terms of customer experience. And by the way, we're going to be talking to another group of legends in customer experience as well, right?
Yes, right around the corner. Chewy, who relishes picking up a 50-pound bag of dog food and hauling it home from the store, all when you can just have it delivered right to your door. Right. I'm sure that's helping to drive.
It's the only workout I get, Keith. So.
Hey, Josue is with us, and Josue, first off, I liked your LinkedIn post last week about kind of embrace the suck as an entrepreneur. Those are certainly some days where you have to do that more than others. And then secondly, Josue, you asked me about the AME conference coming up. We're going to talk about that at the end, and I'll try to answer your question in terms of why come out, because you're considering joining us for that event. So we'll talk about that. All right. So Greg, with that in mind, as much as I love these comments, we better keep driving with this last headline that I just at the last minute picked up off your Slack feed, made a quick graphic so we could tee you up for the next couple minutes.
We have to acknowledge this. This actually came out last Thursday, but it was after we had done our live stream that day. And of course, that one's not all about news. But this happens. So the way that they've presented this is as if this has never happened in the past, right? IBM to break up 109-year-old company to focus on cloud growth. I love these hyperbolic headlines that we are living through in this day and age. The truth is, if you think back, IBM has done this a number of times. And in fact, if you have a Lenovo computer, that computer was once called an IBM computer, and they divested of that. They've divested of other parts of their business. And what they are doing is they feel like cloud, because it is a commoditized industry, is low margin and highly competitive. And they feel like it is hiding the value of their other aspects of the business, and therefore driving down stock valuation. This is how economics work, folks. So they're going to divest this company, create another public company, as yet unnamed, for the cloud applications, and that will actually raise the valuation of relative to revenue and profit and that sort of thing of IBM itself. So really smart move. Brad Jacobs at XPO was considering breaking XPO up into, I can't even remember, 4 or 5 entities just prior to COVID to do this exact same thing. It's an incredible service to the industry because now we've got a company focused on this marketplace, a low margin and competitive marketplace where they can really focus their efforts on a single thing. And then you've got another entity that's going to be much more profitable because of it. Stock has already gone up, by the way. So keep your, if you're thinking there's a stock opportunity, there might be, but again, I am definitely no expert. But the stock has already gone up in reflection of this, just to be clear with everyone.
Well,
but it does change the business for IBM yet again, ever evolving. This kind.
Well, yeah, that's right, and that's perfect segue because Big Blue, if anything, they are ever evolving, and more often than not, the way they make those educated gambles with their chips have worked out. And the article spoke to how they exited the networking business, they exited the PC manufacturing business, they exited the chips business to be in position for this next big shift. Right. And it's really, we did a show on kind of the history of the IBM organization dating back to its earliest times, where basically 3 or 4 businesses got together. And it really is fascinating how they have continued to find ways to evolve by making big, bold bets. So regardless, whatever you think of IBM, you got to hand it to them. They pick and choose those moments pretty well.
Well, it's not the most, in this day of unicorns, it's not the most exciting business, but it is everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. You have to acknowledge the ubiquitousness of IBM in the business environment.
Yep. Sophia, great point. Turning obstacles into opportunities. That's what cutting edge leaders tend to do a lot better than many others. So great point there. Let's just reference, I want to say hello to Latia Thomas. She's one of our favorites. She's been on with us a couple of times. Latia, I hope you're everything you're involved with right now. It seems like you've got 3 or 4 leadership positions. Hopefully it's all going well, and we look forward to reconnecting with you again here soon. And then Demo Perez is with us, the prince of supply chain in Panama, perhaps. But love to have you with us, Demo, and looking forward to getting you on the show here really soon. All right, so Greg, with this next segment, I've got 12:43 Eastern time, so we have a few minutes here. We kind of wanted to look back. We don't have a guest this on today's buzz, so we want to kind of look in. What's that?
We're our own guest.
Yes, that's right. That and the community is always our guest. But we kind of wanted to look back at the last week and offer up a few highlights from some of the conversations we've had. And I'm sure everyone doesn't have a chance to consume every podcast we put out Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday. But, we want to kind of highlight a few in particular. And, of course, one of the highlights for me last week, Greg, was, I know you were, I think you were actually
I was in the audience.
Right. Yeah. That, and you were on a panel of your own that morning.
Yeah, that's right.
Laura Cesari joined us with the one and only Corinne Bursa last Monday on the Buzz. And to our audience that might have had the opportunity to listen in on that, it was my first experience with Laura directly, right? Read and consumed plenty of her keynotes and whatnot. But Greg, in 25 minutes time, I would be hard pressed to find too many other folks that have appeared in any of our shows that drop that much knowledge in that short amount of time. What was your thought there?
Absolutely. When you think about influencers these days, that name gets cast around by your ability to drag 40,000 people or so around with you. But Laura Cesari influences the owners, the founders, the CEOs, the executives, the supply chain professionals, the supply chain leaders of major companies around the world, and has for decades. She was at AMR before Gartner bought it, went out on her own and created her own version of Gartner. Laura Incorporated, which is basically what Supply Chain Insights is, and provides that value in such a, if anyone saw the show, such a straightforward, down to earth, no BS way. Right. If you don't deserve slack, you're not going to get it from Laura. I would encourage folks, if you didn't see this episode, to go back and watch it. Engage with her, because she is a pro and she is unwavering in terms of her objectivity and integrity.
Yep. Well put, Greg. As always, the precise communicator that you are.
Well, I was when I had technology companies, I've been kicked in the stones once or twice by Laura, and so I've experienced that straightforwardness, and I really, really appreciate it. Right?
I do too. So I'm not sure who this LinkedIn user is, but he or she says that they're trying to catch up on the podcast. Thanks for sharing them with those of us learning and trying to grow our knowledge. Hey, that's what we're after. So appreciate you calling that out. Felipe says, since listening to Laura, I'm starting my day with a couple of her comments on supply chain. Great perspective to immerse oneself in supply chain. I agree, completely agree.
400,000 other people, right?
Yes. And to,
what a
again, yes, to your point, Greg, when you said folks are throwing that influencer name out here, there, and everywhere. But when 400,000 folks are following every thought you put out there, Laura is chief influencer in charge, perhaps. Memory says
people are changing their business because of you. That's what I mean. That's what I mean by influencer. I mean, retailers and technology providers and physical logistics providers change their business based on the insights that they get. Yeah.
So, and by the way, that was Rhonda in LinkedIn notes. I was trying to catch up on the podcast. So Rhonda, thanks for joining us, and thanks for the note, Amanda or Clay. Memory says, can you have Sandra McQuillan back on as a guest? Her insights are thought provoking. I completely agree.
Yeah, we ought to drop. We'll in the comments, maybe not now, but after this show goes into recording, we'll drop a couple of the episodes we've done with Sandra. The latest one was a lot about sustainability and incredible.
Yep.
So there, it's already in there. Holy mackerel.
Bam. We don't waste any time. All right. So as much as we enjoyed that one, I had the outstanding opportunity to sit down with Ashfaq Chaudhary, PhD, doctor, I should be calling him, with XPO Logistics. He's president of supply chain for Americas for XPO. And just one quick takeaway here that echoes what Greg and numerous other people on all of our shows have been really embracing as a silver lining during these times is XPO truly is a thought leader when it comes to protecting the essential workers in supply chain. And they're doing that a multitude of different ways. He touched on a couple of those in the conversation. We published that last Friday, and y'all should check that out. XPO is doing some really neat things. And we missed you on that episode, Greg, but I believe you were sailing when we sat down with him.
I'm sailing.
All right. So Tequila Sunrise, it missing a beat these days, continues to get bigger and bigger with bigger and bolder guests. And last week, Greg, he featured a second part of what?
Yeah, Sarah Barnes Humphrey, of course, from Let's Talk Supply Chain, but also CEO of SHIPZ, as she says, SHIPZ, which is a Z here in America. But I've gotten good audience guidance to break these into two pieces because, Scott, as you and our audience know, I cannot be contained by a clock. So these episodes tend to go an hour or more. So we've broken them into a couple slices. This second segment of the interview is not only interesting because you get to hear how she uses reality TV to help her in business, which I found fascinating and stunning, frankly, from the beginning, but also some great takeaways for you as a person, as a supply chain professional, and as a founder. And I mean, pointed directly at you. So she kind of got, let's see, what do I want to say? She was a little bit agitated by what I was what I drew out of her in she was very good sport, but she was not expecting to answer some of the questions that I asked. So, and she did so like a champ. So I really appreciate it. Always great to uplift a female founder. Even I, in what I do, don't meet that many. So it's great to have women founders in technology. We certainly need the additional points of view.
Agreed. And you are the founder whisperer. So Greg, when he says he's not meeting enough, I mean, the numbers game is in his favor because he's having those conversations day in and day out. So great episode here. Love the series, love the niche, and look forward to continue good stuff coming from the Tequila Sunrise Skunk Works. Greg, good stuff there. All right. So Corinne, she may still be with us. She may not. We launched her Tech Talk Digital Supply Chain podcast last week, and we really got her, as I say in the comic book vernacular, her origin story. And as the title indicates, all roads do certainly lead to supply chain for one Corinne Bursa. And you're not going to want to miss hearing her background, which really helps present her point of view that Tech Talk is going to be built on. So you're going to have some of the movers and shakers. In fact, as per our earlier guest last week, Laura Cesari,
right.
Corinne made that happen, and that was neat. So expect a lot more of that with the Tech Talk podcast, and learn in this first episode how Corinne, some of her earliest supply chain management experience as a teenager working for a retail store. I think it was a hardware store. So you're not going to miss it. All right. So Greg, we got to keep driving here. I got 12:52. We're going to try to, I know we've got a somewhat of a hard stop. This was an important episode with my friend Lornette Vestal, and there's so much here, and we can't go into all of it and give it its justice. But two things really got me going here during our conversation. One, Greg, was Lornette mentioned something that if you've been in the military, we all know firsthand the levels of diversity you'll find in the U.S. military are extremely high, and the relationships and how folks, it's kind of like supply chain. You get past, you're able to bridge all those gaps from a cultural experience or a geography experience or just a walk of life experience, bridge all that to make the mission happen. And he really spoke to how powerful of that experience was for him and how much he learned. He mentioned in particular the Filipino culture and history, and how he had some great friends that had that in their background, hailed from the Philippines, and how much he learned there. Secondly, Greg, and this is a gentleman that continues to serve after he exited the U.S. Navy. He went on to graduate, I believe, from the University of Chicago. He went on to serve with the Sierra Club, serving other veterans, really leveraging outdoors to help veterans overcome some of the PTSD and other challenges they have. So he talked about being stopped and accused by police officers, and them, in his words, not seeing the U.S. Navy veteran, them not seeing the University of Chicago graduate, them not seeing the constant give back, volunteer leader, nonprofit leader, but in his words, them seeing him simply as a black man. And as he shared that with me, it was one of those moments where, we all have our gaps in our point of view. And there's a big gap. I haven't experienced that. And I really, our communities and our country needs, the global community needs a lot more Lornette Vestals, and y'all should check out Veteran Voices. I'm a better person from hearing from his experiences. So Greg, that was a special episode for me.
Yeah, that's frustrating as hell to hear that still happens, and it is a great story. Not only how it happened, but also how he, internalized it. Right. Yes.
And despite a variety of obstacles that he presented as he relayed those to me, he constantly overcoming so that he's in position to help others. And it's just a great, good news, feel good story that other folks need to hear. So fair warning, there was a few extra 4-letter words in this conversation as he shared
more like a Tequila Sunrise episode.
Right. Probably so, but it's well worth it. He's such a breath of fresh air. So love what he's doing. And all of that leads us to, as we're going to wrap on some upcoming events, Greg, and in a similar way, we've really enjoyed our AIAG experiences and those learning moments we've had with that organization, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, not just the learning that we've done about the automotive industry or supply chain or corporate responsibility, the specific events that we've worked on, but the adaptability, the resiliency, and the dogged determination of the folks at AIAG, the first event to go from virtual, and they did so in stellar fashion. And I think, we talked about this with Jim Legio last week. They are still leading the way in terms of how to engage an audience, how to provide a service to people who are nowadays online, on video all the time. So yeah, I mean, there's just so much going on there, and this focus on supply chain was really interesting, particularly with these folks.
Yep, agreed. And Sir Jared is who Greg is referring to. We dropped that episode today. Sir Jared's doing some really cool things, especially when it comes to leveraging IoT and many of the other Industry 4.0 technologies to drive supply chain success. Katie and Rob really enjoyed that episode, and it kicks off a series of what will be 6 or 7 different podcast interviews, all associated with the 2020 Supply Chain Summit. So that's the segue into events, folks. The summit is not only is it chock full of folks you need to hear from, but it's really inexpensive. I think it's like $49 to attend. The link is in the show notes. Y'all check that out. As Greg and I like to say, I think Greg coined it, action is in the name, AIAG, and that action is a very important word in that acronym. Okay, so let's talk about some events, Greg, as we wrap here. So SAP Customer Experience. Hey, folks, maybe I'm late to the party, but CX is huge. It's been huge for a while. We all use different vernacular in different industries and sectors, and that might be one reason why I'm a little bit slow sometimes. But SAP is hosting a free event dedicated to the world of CX. As y'all might know, there's a ton of things going on from a CX standpoint in supply chain. Greg, as we sat down and talked about over some delicious pizza on Saturday.
Yes.
We talked about
mask to mask.
Yes, man. And it's tough to eat pizza with a mask. Just
it is.
Never tried.
Yeah.
CSCMP, great organization there. In a 2019 survey, they polled, I think, just over 500 supply chain professionals from across the world. And 61% of them, Greg, said that customer experience would surpass price and product to become the number one driving factor in business in 5 years, I believe, if I've got all that right. So free event on October 14th and 15th, certainly the 14th, to kind of maybe consume some points of view related to CX. Greg, your take.
Customer experience is the goal of supply chain, right? I mean, yes. As many people have said, no product, no program, right?
Yes.
Look, it's the sole purpose that supply chain exists is for customer experience. Let's break supply chain. I'm doing this frequently, as much for my recognition as anyone else's. Let's break supply chain down into what it is. Someone wants the extra tomato you grew, probably maybe your next door neighbor. You hand it to them. End of supply chain, right? The customer is satisfied. Great customer experience, right? So everything else that we put in place in the supply chain is a hurdle or hindrance to that, including our desire to save money by producing out of the country, or the consumer's desire to have tomatoes year round, which force us to get them from other parts of the world. So there are probably a lot of people on this show right now who have never known that there used to be a season for tomatoes. There was a time of year when you didn't get tomatoes, right? So what we have to acknowledge is, as supply chain professionals and as consumers, that we are complicating our own experience, our own customer experience, by virtue of how we desire goods and how we expect the pricing and availability to be delivered vis-a-vis the supply chain.
Very nice, Greg. And I'm glad that the days of not having access to tomatoes year round are long gone. Even if they aren't the homegrown tomatoes that we might have access to in November. So here, Clay. So let me be transparent about this. Clay is my brother. I am very proud.
I did not know he was an MBA. That's pretty impressive.
Oh, he much smarter than I am. You should know that. Greg. You and him should get together and solve the universal ills sometimes. Clay is active. He's a thought leader in the CX space. He's with a group called Medallia, and he's been doing some big things for a number of years. So he says supply chain and customer experience are inextricably linked.
Dead.
Clay, why didn't you tell me that like 8 years ago at least? That would have been nice to know. But y'all, hey, check him out, connect with him. They really neat things they're doing in the CX space. And, as this recent experience we're having a lot of fun with related to SAP, you can learn something from anyone you sit down with, for 30 minutes and have a conversation, and some of what you learn, you may be the only person in the world that it's new to. So really enjoy the conversations we've had here around CX. James, I like this feedback, Greg. Check this out. You guys talk about this industry.
More people need to be congratulatory of us, so we don't have to be so self-congratulatory. No, thank you very much. I'm glad that it lands that way because, look, we not only have a tremendous passion for this industry, but for serving our community by delivering it in a way that is interesting, right? Inspiring, engaging. So thank you. It's good to know that it's landing that way, at least sometimes.
Agreed. And the word earnest is such a powerful word there, James. So really appreciate it. We need to bring you to all of our live streams and get you to pepper some comments in there. I'm kidding. But thank you so much for sharing. It makes our day. All right. So let's keep driving with events for the sake of time real quick. So I want to make sure we give resources to people, and especially free, inexpensive resources like SAP Customer Experience. You'll learn something sitting down, spending time with this group here. All right. So this is an opportunity to share your experiences and insights. So this is the second annual State of Supply Chain Sustainability Report that CSCMP and MIT and others are putting together, and they need your input. So I've got the link in the show notes. Please take a moment to click on that and take answer some questions. The report will be better off for it. So y'all check that out. Now, AME. So Greg, let's talk about AME for a minute and some of the major themes that we part of this panel session coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah, well, I mean, lean, right? I mean, think about how much heat lean has taken, and the other aspects of manufacturing that need to be discussed. And this is an organization focused on this. We've actually interviewed and had some other events with the AME team in the past, and it's always productive. This is kind of a sneaky organization in that it's not huge, right? It's not a huge organization, but what they do is they show you firsthand how manufacturing works. They allow you to engage one manufacturer with another and learn from that. And this is the new way of doing that, because we can't, as you can see, this is AME Toronto. I think we'll all just have pictures of Toronto in the background, but
this time,
this time. So great group of folks. I don't know if you've been following any of their discussion or promotion around this, but it's going to be a really, really interesting discussion.
Yep. Well put. And one of the things we're going to talk about, we're having a planning session for this breakout session this week, as a matter of fact, and it includes the CEO of AME, Kimberly Humphrey. We're going to be talking about fact and fiction when it comes to some of the reshoring and nearshoring conversations we're having. So I think it's going to be a really frank and informative conversation. You can check out AME. And to Josue, finish first thought first. We've got the registration link in the show notes to anybody who wants to check it out. But Josue, you were asking about this event for you in particular. I would argue one of the litmus tests, perhaps, of determining if you would like to be a part of AME programming is if you want to grow your manufacturing industry network and really get finger on the pulse of what's going on, especially in the U.S. manufacturing industry. This is going to be a great group. This is going to be a great organization. It's not the most inexpensive registration, but a lot of heavy hitting breakout sessions, including our panel sessions. So y'all check that out. And again, great group for expanding your manufacturing network and really gaining insights from manufacturing executives.
Insights are the key, because Josue, at the very least, you can figure out how their processes might be at cross purposes with your own, that of transporting their goods, right? And how you can create some collaboration, maybe some communication, and maybe even some solutions so that they don't half pack your truck, right? Or whatever else could happen, right?
Right.
I mean, so, I think the thing you have to recognize in supply chain is that the butterfly effect, as you love to say, Scott, is such an appropriate anecdote here, is that whatever happens upstream or downstream, it impacts everything up and downstream and in between.
Yep. Well put there. And Nerfa was just talking about some of the prereqs for anyone that attends a Canadian event, including maple syrup and a few other things.
Igloos and beavers.
Yes.
Come on, man.
They're fun. Too funny. Man. All right. A couple last things. So y'all check this out. Stand up and sound off, echoing, kind of going back to some of the elements of the Lornette Vestal conversation we had. This is going to be focused on two women that are really working hard to move the needle when it comes to equity in Fortune 500 organizations. And not only are we going to hear their point of view and perspectives and experiences, but we're going to equally hear from our audience. That's what this whole Stand Up and Sound Off series is all about, is making sure our audience has equal time to not just ask questions, but to share what their experiences have been. And Greg, as you say about the theme here, you don't have to stand up, but you better sound off, right? Did I get that right?
That's good. Yeah. Sound off. And look, the philosophy that we have taken since, Scott, you and I have been working together, is that very often these kind of discussions are an uncomfortable discussion. But the truth is, our philosophy, gang, is that the discussions that cause this discussion to be necessary, like the discussions that Lornette had, those should be the uncomfortable discussions. Right. And these are all about progress. They're all about solution. No one's getting blamed. No one's getting their chops busted in these things. This is all about solutions and moving forward. And that's why I love the spirit of these stand up and sound off events. Yep. They're not uncomfortable at all. Sometimes the topics and sometimes the stories are heart-wrenching, frankly, but we're all approaching this with the spirit of trying to move forward, of trying to look. I think we all want everyone to be happy. We want everyone to be treated fairly, right?
And have opportunity.
Yeah. And
right.
And that's all we're trying to solve here. That's really what we're after.
Yep. So y'all join us for that. New website. Finally, radio is dead, at least here at Supply Chain Now. And we use that tongue in cheek. Of course, I listen to sports talk all the time. In fact, I might be listening to the Braves in my car radio tonight. But you can find
radio's not dead because who was it? Sirius just gave what's his name $107 million contract.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, we need to check out.
What is his name? The shock jock guy.
Oh, Howard Stern?
Howard Stern.
Really? Yeah. How about that? Well, regardless, you can find us now at supplychainnow.com, and our mission remains giving voice to those moving us forward, especially cross global supply chain. Right. So check us out. Let us know how we can help. I want to pop that out. I want to wrap up on something here. Tom shared, Greg, it just about gets my chin. Tom shared what I thought. I love his commentary here. And he says, Scott, thanks for sharing highlights of the Navy veteran discussion with Lornette Vestal with us. I know for me, we did not talk about the word diversity when I came into the military in the late 80s. We just all worked together and made it happen. Mission first, like you said. I worked with a diverse group of professionals throughout my career to include international and coalition partners from around the world And that has become a valuable experience. I bet that's one of the reasons why Tom, it has been leading and doing things in supply chain because of that background. And man, ignore the noise, put the noise all aside. Let's get the mission done with whoever we work with, and give each other that mutual respect. And that's certainly one of the things the military is good about, teaching its members. So Greg, get you to weigh in on that before we call it a day.
Yeah. I mean, see your coworkers, see your fellow, your fellow soldiers, however you want to think about it, see them as people. And when you're in a foxhole with bullets equally coming at all of you, it's really, really easy to see that.
That's true.
Right. So, look, I'm probably a happy idiot when it comes to these topics because my family is relatively diverse. I mean, I look like, you'd expect me to look, right? But when you dig into my family, you recognize there's a significant amount of diversity, and I lived in a very diverse community, and I just never really even thought of, I honestly have never, even though I've never had, those kind of experiences, or I've never internalized them the way that I've heard so many people internalize them. And it's tragic that those things happen. And, it really comes down to just viewing everyone as a person.
Yep.
Just a person.
Agreed. And along those lines, this week as well, and I know these things because of the research we put in over the weekend for this week in business history, but this week is when Martin Luther King Jr. was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, of course, for all of his outstanding, exceptional leadership when it comes to fighting racial inequalities through the means of nonviolence. And he was one of the youngest ever. I think when he was bestowed it, I think he was the youngest. He was the youngest ever. I think in recent years, there's been a couple of teenagers, which is really cool, get bestowed the Nobel Peace Prize. But hey, got to learn from the past, and while you keep moving forward. So good stuff here, Greg. Love these episodes. Man, there's so many comments we couldn't get to, but y'all keep them coming, please. Larry says, all I cared about was if your rifle was pointed the same direction mine was.
Darn Skippy.
Larry, I'm sure you got some great stories to share. I was a lowly data analyst, so I didn't have those experience in the Air Force. But nevertheless, thanks for bringing the perspective today. Thanks for bringing your comments.
Everybody,
your engagement. They sure did. Y'all join us tomorrow. We have a live stream with the great folks over at Omnia Partners. We're going to be talking about GPO in a very forward-thinking way. It's not your grandmother's or grandfather's GPO, right, Greg?
Well, I mean, the awakening that I've had is it's not just about public. So many dealing with the government, right? So many companies are used to that, dealing with a GPO and dealing with the government, but now dealing with the private sector, commercial sector, it just makes so much sense. There's so much power, and the thing that really struck me in the conversation or two that we've had with them is that it's not all about price, right? It's about a lasting relationship. So,
yep, agreed. And it'd be a good conversation whether you were looking to leverage a GPO in a very new 2050 way, we'll call it, or if you're a supplier looking to, plug into the network like that. You're going to learn a lot from Omnia Partners tomorrow. You're going to learn a lot from Mike Griswold with Gartner on Wednesday's live stream. And Thursday, we're going to learn from a recent e-commerce executive. We're still working on positioning due to some of the changes, but stay tuned for that Thursday as we get a kind of a look behind the scenes of some of the big movers and shakers in the world of e-commerce. So stay tuned for that. All right. So Greg, as much as I hate to do it, but we're going to wrap up today's episode. Friends, community members, participants, supply chain practitioners, you name it, all the folks that chimed in here today.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're the best part of the journey.
I mean, I don't know why today it's kind of really hit me that how engaged this community is, man. It's
how smart.
Great. It's fantastic. Really appreciate it. This has been enlightening for me.
Agreed.
Frankly.
And you both. All right. So everyone, hey, same challenge as always. Do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now.